evening and welcome to Howlin' About Entertainment with Jake D. Or no, we're talking pop culture with Jake D tonight. Howlin' is on Sundays, by God. Good evening. Good evening. So, The Stand, episode 4. My goodness. This episode was an interesting change of pace from the previous two in particular. I'll start off with rating. This episode was ridiculously meh. It was not as offensively bad as episode 3, and neither was it remotely good whatsoever. The show continues to take extreme liberties with the book and the story that we know and love and are familiar with. So on a scale of 10, I'm coming in honestly at a 4 for this episode 4 of the 9-episode run of The Stand on CBS. Just another red shirt. Good to see you here tonight, my friend. Always good to have you, sir. But yeah, a 4, and it's a shaky 4. Which is interesting. Last week I gave the episode a 4 as well, and I did like that one less, but there was so much meh tonight on this episode that it was just bad television overall, even if it wasn't as just grating on you like the episode that we got last week. So you open up this week with the committee is holding a meeting in Boulder, and they're talking with the residents, and there's a lot of back and forth. They want to know what's going on with the injured guy that came into town at the end of last episode who ended up dying and getting disposed of by the body crew. They want to know when the power is going to come back on. There's just some general unruliness from the citizens wanting life to get back to normal. And there were some meetings like this in the book. I don't remember if this specific meeting took place kind of in the way it was portrayed on the show, because those parts of the book didn't catch my memory too sharply. But it was the acting was really flat. Now, in fairness, Stu was not good in front of an audience. At least that's what they said. And yet I remember in the book talking about how once the guy got rolling, he was able to really work with and feel his audience on the stage. So, I mean, unless my memory is just really bad about that, I think that's a bit of a stark contrast between what happened in the book stories versus what we saw on screen in the show. And they had, actually Larry take over because Larry's got experience as a performer. And that's just not my recollection of how it went. But that could be shaky memory because it has been a fair bit of time since I read the novel. So that could just be me remembering poorly. But it was just really kind of a flat scene that you didn't get much from it. Clobbering Times, good to see you, sir. Glad to have you. Appreciate you joining. So after this meeting at the Free Zone, we do get an interesting scene from the book, which was where Nadine, she went to Harold and she's recruiting him to be, basically Flag's assassin of the committee. And it was a solid and faithful retelling of the scene. And it worked out well because she's got this thing where she can do just about anything to show Harold a good time, shall we say, other than that one thing, which, I don't know, for me, it's kind of an important thing, but there's just that one thing that they can't do together. But other than that, they do certainly enjoy each other during their remaining time in Boulder as Harold is plotting the plan to take out the committee. Fortunately, we did not get the just head snapping back and forth shots in time tonight that we got in the past couple of episodes. We only had, it was like 2 flashbacks tonight, which helped. And there was longer scenes in the past. But of course, the nonlinear storytelling is still defeating the audience's ability to empathize with our main characters on screen who are supposed to be our heroes. You're not developing the sort of attachment that you ought to. The 2 major flashback scenes that we get is there's a scene in the book where a guy in a truck had captured women and he was using them for his own purposes, right? I mean, fill it in within your own head there what a sort of bully, insecure guy who wants to abuse and dominate women is going to do to them in a post-apocalyptic world. Harold and Franny roll up on them, and in the show he tries to beat the crap out of Harold while collecting Franny for his harem. And Stu and Glenn happen to roll up and interrupt what's going on. The first 2 women who were captured escape. One of them gets shot, and then Dana manages to take the guy out with it was a pipe of some type, and a pretty brutal killing. And a scene that sort of meets that description did happen in the book, but it was a larger group, as I recall. And some of the, that being the place where Franny and Stu, Glenn and Harold got back together. Again, unless my memory's failing me, that's not how all these groups came together. A harem, you're in, huh, Alex? Yeah. I got to admit, it's not for me. I have enough trouble keeping one lady happy, so harem's just not going to be my thing, brother. Glad to see you here, though. Very glad to see you. The killing of that guy who had imprisoned those women was pretty true to the book, and the group sort of came together in going to Boulder. We also get to see after that the committee is meeting and talking, and they decide that there needs to be an election to determine the leadership that there's going to be in the Boulder Free Zone. And again, somewhat true to the story from the novelization, but once again truncated. There were a lot of meetings of the committee, and this is a piece that shortening the number of meetings and things like that the Free Zone Committee held is a good choice for where you can compress the story. But then we see Tom and Nick in a warehouse in Colorado, and they run into a memorable character from the book by the name of, I believe it's Julie Lawler, if I remember correctly. And she is, she's just a piece of work, and she is most definitely trouble. And they did cut out the intimate scene between Nick and Julie that happened in the novel, and they sort of cut right to the chase, where she was rather violent and certainly did not treat Tom very well, and they bugged out of there. But Nick happened to see an advertisement for Hemingford Home, and this, for me, where that leads Nick to is an elder care facility named Hemingford Home there in Colorado. And this was a very radical change to Mother Abigail's story from the novel. And I found this to be very destructive to Mother Abigail's character. Tom and Nick meet her in the nursing home where she's the last person alive. She's done the best she can to dignify the other residents who died from Captain Trips. And she's even kind of talking to them rather than talking to herself when Nick and Tom arrive. And this was a very significant change to who Mother Abigail is, as King portrayed her in the novel as a literal prophet of God. And he certainly held her up to be exactly that, along the lines of Isaiah or Joseph, or any of the Old Testament prophets. That is very much what Mother Abigail was in this story. Max Rottenstein, good to see you here, my friend. Glad that you could make it. And making Mother Abigail a resident at a nursing home rather than living on her own at 108 years old, having outlived her children and her grandchildren, and still maintaining her household at the family farm in Nebraska. This was a very important characterization piece for Mother Abigail that they just completely threw out the window. And that background and approach of who she was so terribly important in the novel. And having her just be an old lady in a nursing home takes so much away from who she is in the novel. And it's a bad decision. I'm very displeased with the producers and the writers for making that particular change, because I think it fundamentally alters who Mother Abigail is in the story. Now, granted, she's not the main character like your Stews, your Larrys, your Glens, these folks, right? Particularly the four who go to Vegas later, but she is the top of the second tier characters in Boulder. And these drastic changes to who she is from the novelization, just they don't sit well with me. And that's a big part of why this thing clocks in at a 4 out of 10 for me this week, because it's just bad. And yes, Mother Abigail was a strong, independent lady who thanked God for everything, including taking a good dump. Damn right she was, Max. She was a strong, independent Black woman. And taking that backstory away from her actually kind of neuters her to an extent. And it takes away some of her power and her independence and her strength. And that's a lot of what bothers me so much about how they've changed it. It's not right. It's not Mother Abigail if you don't have that. And then two other really major events are covered in this episode that were, I'm with you on that one, Alex. She absolutely thanks God for those. It's because particularly at 108, in her own words, that is actually a really good and important thing to still have happen. The two other major events that we see in this episode are the election of the committee and the restoration of electricity to Boulder, and the selection of the spies that they're going to send to Vegas. So the election of the committee, it went, roughly how it did in the novel, although Harold's standing up and motioning on the floor that they all simply be brought in as a slate and Toto unanimously. It didn't have the effect that it did in the novel, because in the book, you're in Harold's head very much. And they could have really done that by having him running through his thoughts, or they could have had him typing on his typewriter and doing a monologue as he's banging it out. But you don't understand the depth of Harold's depravity and his lunacy with how they've presented his Boulder pieces. So this being a part of his plan to make sure that they stay together in order to assassinate them, it just misses the mark just awfully. Then the committee is nominating their spies to send to Vegas. And right now, we as viewers, if you didn't read the book, you have no fucking clue why they're sending these people to Vegas. The only thing that's happened is they had somebody roll in with evidence of crucifixion wounds. But they don't actually know he came from Vegas. And they don't even have any really experience or knowledge of Flag, and you don't even get a good reason to send these people out, but okay, they recruit them. In the novel, each person who was close to the spies approached the person individually and sent them out surreptitiously, and it was a very clandestine thing. In the show, the entire committee spoke to and interviewed these people. And yeah, the best performance, probably honestly, is coming from Harold in this show. The guy who plays Harold is he is ungodly creepy and is doing an excellent job. Yeah, much more of a monster. And yes, a prototypical incel. In fact, he's in many ways the model of what people think of as the modern day incel. And we're not getting that strongly enough in the show, despite the fact the actor's doing a hell of a good job with what he's given. Nobody likes this guy. He creeps the shit out of everybody, which is what he should do as a viewer. But they're not giving him enough to work with to build that. The conversation with the spies was so, you're not into it. You're not invested in it in any way, shape, or form. In the book, this was a really big fucking deal. And it just kind of comes out of nowhere and you don't care about it in the show. So they take one of the ladies who got away from the abusive guy with the harem earlier. And I'm not even sure if they said her name prominently whatsoever in the episode. I had to kind of go back and look it up in the X-ray function to see if I could figure out just who it was. And it was Dana, because I didn't recall the name because it had been a while since I read the book, and I don't think I even heard him say it in the episode. But Dana had a cool story, and it was compelling. And again, among some of the higher second tier characters in the book. And other than the fact that you saw her beat that guy who was abusing her, there's again no connection to sending Dana out to spy on Flag. Now, if I'm not mistaken, and this is interesting in this woke era of entertainment that we're in, which this show largely isn't. If I recall correctly, Dana is a lesbian in the novel. And I may be mistaken. It's been a while since I've read it, but I'm pretty sure about that. And it's not even mentioned in this episode whatsoever, which is kind of interesting in this whole era of intersectionalism. And taking away Mother Abigail's strength and power is also a little bit odd in this woke era of entertainment that we're in. The show is not woke or even particularly intersectional. It's just bad because you don't give a shit that Dana's getting sent off to Vegas to be a spy and potentially die. And it's forgot most of the good books you've read. You can start again, dude. I am so with you on that, Alex. It is kind of nice. So the second spy that gets recruited is Judge Ferris, whom we've never met, because we didn't see any of Larry's journey across the country following Harold. And the judge is a very cool character who was really important to Larry as he was traveling across the country. He was an advisor and almost a conscience for Larry as Larry led his group of people to Nebraska and ultimately Boulder. So picking the judge who was gender swapped in this show versus the novel, but that one, not particularly important. You can get away with it. It's kind of a second tier character. I don't think it hurt. Being a woman versus a man didn't hurt this character at all. What hurt this character is you don't know who the fuck she is. You don't know anything about her. You don't really understand why the judge was selected to be one of the spies. Hell, we don't even really understand why they're sending spies at all. But they go ahead, they send Judge Ferris on, and the final spy selected is, of course, Tom Cullen. And once again, the way that it was done in the book was completely just bastardized, really. The way that they got Tom to be the spy and know what to do and know when to come home and all that was they hypnotized him in the novel, which we didn't see at all in the show whatsoever. And the reason for his cover story in Vegas in the novelization, or not the novelization, the novel, because that's where it started. The cover story that he had for why he got thrown out of Boulder was that he'd started hitting between the sheets with a woman, and they wanted to get the mentally deficient man out of their gene pool, so they threw him out of the Boulder free zone. That's the story that we get in the novel, and in the show, they just tell him to say, "Yeah, he just rode his bike to Vegas." And they give him the same instructions about coming home that he had in, no development for the judge at all, Max. The judge was in about 30 seconds of the show. Yeah, Moon spells FML. Goddamn right. That's a fan of the novel right there, ladies and gentlemen. Not developing the judge is a fucking crime because that was a great character. And I guess skipping the hypnotization thing with Tom, you can kind of get away with. But one of the neat elements of Tom's character was that when he was hypnotized, he was almost clear mentally, and he was nearly normal while he was under hypnosis, which was one of the reasons they were able to very easily instruct him what he needed to do, and he was able to absorb the cover story and do his thing. Now, Tom being sent out as a spy is going to become very important later in the story, assuming the ending sort of last 10% of the book or so remains true here in the show. Although, as we know, that King did write the final episode, which is something of a new ending or a coda to The Stand, then, who knows, maybe the importance of Tom on the trip home gets tossed out the window too. But yeah, that's kind of the whole episode. Other than, another big change that they made was with bringing the power back on. They did kind of touch on the whole, they needed to shut off circuits and lights and appliances and stuff, but they skipped over the fact that getting the power on originally blew out the transformers, and then they had to create a committee to go unplug and switch off the lights throughout the whole city before they could risk turning the power back on a second time. They just condensed that into a singular event and had this sort of throwaway line about, hey, all you guys in the body crew, we want you to, see if you see any stray lights when the power comes on and go shut them off, which of course leads to the death of Teddy when Nadine shoots him at the end of the episode because he sees her and Harold taking the explosives from the ski patrol. And that was it, man. It's bad. This show is bad. And yeah, the hypnosis of Tom Cullen was a genius plot point, and it was completely omitted. And yeah, they may very well completely omit his trip home, which would be a tragedy. Because it was, to me, it was an exceptionally memorable portion of the novel. But 4 out of 10, guys, I can't recommend this show at all. I really can't. Even though I'm getting lots of views from these reviews and lots of watch time, and a lot of folks have subscribed to the channel as a result of me reviewing The Stand, this show just sucks. It's bad television. It's Star Trek Discovery level bad, which I guess shouldn't surprise us because it is coming from CBS All Access. But it's horribly disappointing because I had high hopes for this as a property I was really looking forward to seeing on screen. And CBS just shit the bed on this one. I guess they just followed Amber Heard's lead on that when they cast her. They figured that's just what they do with the show. Because that's what they've done. It's just awful. And God, I wish I could recommend it because I love the property. All right. Well, that's all I've got for the evening, man. So please, everybody, if you've watched this far, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends on social media, and if you've just encountered the channel for the first time, please do consider subscribing as I continue to cover other pop culture, particularly television reviews, as well as a weekly review of what's happened in entertainment every Sunday evening at 5:15 Central Time. Thanks for popping in. Good night.